This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you are very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. A few weeks ago, I went to the Holbein exhibition that's being held at the Queen's Gallery, Buckingham Palace, and I just had the most wonderful time. It was especially nice to catch up with a painting that I consider to be kind of like an old friend. I have, after all, spent a lot of time talking about this particular painting with groups of visitors at Hampton Court Palace, and in recent months I have rather missed doing so. I'm talking about The Family of Henry VIII. It's by an unknown artist of the British School. And today we're going to take a look at the artistic choices that have been made in this particular image. But before we jump into today's topic, I want to say an absolutely massive thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring another video on this channel. Squarespace has made building, updating and managing my website so easy. I started by using their form to see which template might best fit my needs. Then I was able to customise each part of it from there. From fonts to colours to layouts and images, it was just a case of dragging and dropping what you want where you want it. From showing off my most popular videos on YouTube, to hosting my merch store, to managing my mailing list. My Squarespace website offers me everything I need. As I have mentioned before, I love the fact that I can use Squarespace through my desktop or laptop, but also through the app on my phone. From analysing the website traffic to editing the website itself, this allows me to do what I need to do from anywhere. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then, when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/reading the past to save 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. But now, it's time for us to take a look at the painting that, among other things, displays King Henry VIII's fantasy family, and also his ultimate intention for the future of his nation and his dynasty. It is believed that this nearly 1.5 metre tall and over 3.5 metre long canvas was commissioned to be displayed in the Presence Chamber at Whitehall Palace, a space where Henry VIII would receive those visitors who were deemed significant enough to merit entry into the King's presence. If this was indeed the intended location for this painting, then I think we can infer that it was not simply meant to be a piece for Henry to appreciate on his own. Rather, it was meant to send a message to others. According to the Royal Collection Trust, this painting was recorded as having been in the Privy Gallery at Whitehall in 1639. That it was then sold during the interregnum before being recovered during the Restoration. It was reportedly being displayed in the King's Privy Gallery at Whitehall in 1666. Presumably, though, it was moved prior to 1698 because on the 4th of January in that year, a fire destroyed almost all of the palace. So for this painting to have survived, I think we must assume that it wasn't at Whitehall at the time the fire started. Whitehall Palace is also the setting for the scene that is being depicted here. On either edge of the painting we are being shown through those two archways a view of the Great Garden at Whitehall. The heraldic beasts of King Henry VIII and his family are visible on those poles that we can see that have been placed among the flower beds. The flower beds themselves are marked out by fences that have been painted with green and white stripes, green and white being favoured colours of the Tudors. The description of this painting on the Royal Collection Trust website states that, quote, "Through the archway on the left can be seen part of Whitehall Palace and the Westminster Clock House, balanced by a view through the archway on the right of the north transept of Westminster Abbey and a single turret of Henry VIII's Great Close Tennis Court." Further to this, the part of Whitehall that can be seen is, according to Alison Weir, quote, "the Lady Mary's lodging, with its grotesque decoration." King Henry VIII and his family have been positioned in a sumptuously decorated space. The walls are ornately panelled. There are carved pillars, and in both cases, the details on these have been picked out in gold. The floor has been plastered and painted. The ceiling is adorned with Tudor roses. Perhaps these have been moulded, or carved, maybe painted, or perhaps they are leather mache, similar to those badges that can be seen adorning the ceiling of the Great Watching Chamber at Hampton Court Palace today. Henry, dressed in cloth of gold, is seated beneath an embroidered canopy. This canopy features personalised details. We have the monogram, HR8, for Henricus Rex 8 in Roman numerals. This monogram sits above Henry's crowned arms. The shield features the Lions of England and the fleur-de-lis of France. A reminder to all that saw this that Henry had asserted his right to rule in both places. The motto beneath it is the traditional Dieu et mon droit, or God and my right. These are the powers, the claim by which Henry had the right to rule. In this achievement of arms, the heraldic supporters are the Red Dragon of Cadwallader, which emphasises the Tudors' ancestral connection to Wales and their claimed descent from Cadwallader, the 7th century king of Gwynedd. The other supporter is the White Greyhound of Richmond, as it became known due to its use by King Henry VIII's grandfather, Edmund Tudor. He began to use it following his half-brother, King Henry VI's decision to grant him the earldom of Richmond. Henry VIII's seat and the cushion upon which he is resting his feet are themselves placed on an expensive imported carpet, of the kind that was likely to be manufactured in what is now part of Turkey. Carpets like this were often used to decorate the walls or the tables of the very wealthy. Placing them upon the floor, allowing them to be walked on in the manner shown here, was opulent indeed. Additionally, carpets like this were often found, in Northern European art, placed beneath the feet of the Virgin Mary, and thus they had become explicitly connected to the divine, to the Holy Family. Henry's own divinely approved family have been placed right beside him, for through his marriage to Jane Seymour, Henry must, presumably, have felt that at last he was in a marriage that pleased God, because this was, after all, the marriage that produced his only legitimate surviving son and heir, Edward. Here we see that Prince Edward stands at his father's right hand, while Jane is seated to his left. This trio are somewhat enclosed within this image, by the columns that frame them, and also by the borders of that carpet that sits beneath their feet. At a time when the doctrine of images is forming a large part of our collective discourse, it is perhaps fitting that we look at this 16th century example. This central tableau is a work of fantasy. This painting dates to around 1545, and at this time, Henry VIII had less than 2 years to live. He was plagued by ill health. His leg was ulcerated, stinking, and terribly painful. He had gained lots of weight. At times, he was utterly reliant on a system of carriages and pulleys to enable him to move through the corridors and up the stairs of his palace at Whitehall. His eyesight was failing. He had begun to accumulate numerous pairs of spectacles. But the editing doesn't stop there. As for the rest of this trio, Prince Edward would have been around 8 when this piece was being painted. He is shown here as a mini version of his dad, with a strong stance, robust personage, and exacting stare. Like his father, Edward's mother is also dressed in cloth of gold here, in a gown that appears to be lined with that most royal fur of ermine. Jane Seymour had, however, died when Prince Edward was just days old, on the 24th of October 1537, and indeed, by the time we think this image was created, Henry had married 3 further times. In 1545, his wife and queen was Katherine Parr. And if you're wondering what that good lady might have thought about her husband resurrecting his long-dead wife to sit beside him as his queen, then I suggest that this portrait, which also dates to around 1545, might be her response. Notice how she too has chosen to be painted with a carpet beneath her feet. If you'd like to know more about this, I do discuss this piece and other art that Katherine Parr commissioned in my video on her that I will be leaving linked. Whatever his current wife might have felt, this was the message that Henry VIII wanted to display. This was his plan for the future of his dynasty. Edward, his son by Jane Seymour, would be the one to follow him onto the throne, with the expectation being that the boy would grow into a man who would himself marry and father sons of his own, who would, in turn, sit upon the throne themselves. Of course, Henry VIII would have known better than anyone else not to count your heirs before they've hatched. And so, either side of this central framed trio, somewhat distanced, placed beyond the edge of the carpet and outside of the columns, stand Plan B and C. They are respectively Henry's daughter by Katherine of Aragon, Mary, and his daughter by Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth. They stand off to either side, and they have been positioned in such a manner that they remind me of the heraldic supporters that can be found on the royal arms, at least in a way. This is arguably a representation of the Tudor dynasty following the Third Succession Act, which received its royal assent in 1544. While this act did not legitimise Mary or Elizabeth, it did return them to the line of succession. According to this act, after Henry VIII, the crown would pass to Edward and to his heirs. In default of those heirs, any children that Henry had with Katherine Parr or any future wife would come next, followed by their heirs. In default of those heirs, it would be Mary and her heirs, followed likewise by Elizabeth and her heirs. This plan would be further affirmed in Henry VIII's last will and testament, which underwent a final revision at the very end of 1546 and was signed using the dry stamp. This document did, however, take the line of succession further. Through the will, after Elizabeth and her heirs would come Frances, who was the eldest daughter of Henry's younger sister Mary. She would be followed by her heirs, and this was Jane Grey and her sisters Katherine and Mary. Next, the line was to pass to Mary Tudor's younger daughter Eleanor, and then on to her heirs. In this painting, Elizabeth and Mary are dressed in a very similar style. They both wear French hoods, gowns of damask, albeit in slightly different patterns. They both have red velvet full sleeves and underskirts. Mary is shown to be wearing a cross around her neck, while Elizabeth wears a letter A around hers. It has been suggested that this piece of jewellery was something that Elizabeth inherited from her mother, Anne Boleyn. Quite why this necklace has been allowed to feature in this painting is debated, and I do wonder what you think might be going on here. The Tudors are, however, not alone in this image. Out in the garden, framed by either doorway, we are shown a woman and a man with a monkey. It is believed that these individuals were court fools, that the woman was Jane, surname unknown, and that the man was William Somers. Records show that Jane the Fool frequently performed alongside another performer known as Lucretia the Tumbler. It's suggested that Lucretia might also have acted as Jane's, in quotes, keeper. William Somers is also recorded as having had a, quote, keeper. A keeper would potentially be necessary if Jane and William were, as has been suggested, what was known during the period as, quote, natural fools or, quote, innocents. Today, we would likely understand this as referring to an individual with a developmental delay, of the kind that might result in them requiring additional support and or care. Natural fools were frequently present as valued members of noble households and royal courts. They were considered by many to be closer to God, more able to speak the truth of matters due to their perceived innocence. Feeding, housing, clothing and caring for natural fools could be viewed as an act of Christian charity that had the edifying benefit of reminding others of the value of humility. Any positive feelings that we might have in regards to these evident attempts to care for these, quote, natural fools in elite households is, I would argue, diminished and undermined by the fact that it was also intended that these people should be viewed as a source of amusement. There is, after all, potentially a pretty fine line between being laughed with and laughed at. There is also very little evidence that natural fools had any volition with regards to where, how, or whom they served. There is at least one example of a fool named Sexton who was gifted to King Henry VIII by Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. This occurred apparently to the great but ultimately futile distress of Sexton himself. Both Jane the Fool and William Somers are recorded as having passed from one master or mistress to another. Their views on these changes are, however, not recorded. As a final note, the monkey that we can see accompanying William Somers here, the one who appears to be grooming him, is thought to represent a real monkey, one who lived at court and who in some way contributed to the entertainments that were provided by William. As I have mentioned previously, I would like to discuss the presence of monkeys in the art of this period in another video. In fact, I think this might be best achieved in a video that also looks at monkeys as pets in Tudor England more generally, perhaps even as part of a video on Tudor pets as a whole. Please do let me know if a video like this would be of interest to you. But what do you think of the family of Henry VIII? How do you view this painting? What, if any, parts of this image and our discussion of it stood out to you in particular? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comments section underneath this video. I would also love it if you could pop an emoji or a social glyph in the comments too, because that will help to boost the engagement, and the more engagement a video gets, the more YouTube shares it out, and that will help to grow our community. As we've been talking about paintings, royalty, monkeys, how about you see which emoji you think fits best for the things that you were most interested in this video? I am looking forward to seeing which ones come up. You can find me elsewhere on social media. I will leave links to the other places you can find me on the internet in my description box. Please do follow me over on some or all of those so that we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope that you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, why not tell your friends about it? In fact, if you like my channel, please let some pals know about that too. You can let me know you like this video in particular by hitting the thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel. And if you think you have subscribed, maybe just have a little check to make sure that YouTube hasn't mysteriously unsubscribed you against your will. And while you are there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, please hit the bell icon that sits beside the subscribe button and then select all in the drop-down menu that will appear, and that way YouTube allege they will tell you when I've next uploaded, but also when I am next going live, which I do to talk about the history news, and I know you are not going to want to miss that. We have of course also got our failsafe. Head over to my website www.katrinamarchant.com. It will be linked, and as you can see on screen, once you're at the website, go over to the contact page. On the contact page, please put your email address in that little box. That will add you to my mailing list, and then I will send you out an email once a week with everything that I'm up to and all of the links that you might find useful for the next few days. I hope you're going to have a great day whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.